Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. And as people come in, then we'll just have them trickle in. But I want to first introduce myself to everyone who doesn't know me and my colleague as well. So I am Jenna Dillon. I am an executive coach and the CEO founder of the Executive Performance Institute for Coaching. That is a company where we have expert coaches and trainers developing and teaching people to become executive coaches. And I have one of my lead trainers and executive coaches with me here, Roberta Cocco. She's going to be co-presenting with me. We actually are both have an artistic creative background, so we were really excited to be coming into the Help Networks space and gearing this webinar series in a very creative way for all of you. So with that, I do want to point out a couple things about Zoom if you aren't familiar or you're getting acclimated. As you're watching this webinar, there's a couple of different views that you can see this from. If you're in the window for Zoom in the top right corner, there's a button that either says speaker view or gallery view. If you hit speaker view, it will go to, I think right now, me, because I'm speaking and everyone else is muted. And then when Roberta comes up and we'll be talking, then it'll go to her because she'll be the one unmuted. So if that isn't the case for you, I'll give another option if for some reason Zoom's being funky. If you go to gallery view, and you go to, since I'm speaking right now, my box, my window, in the top right corner, there's 3 dots, but that's a blue button. You click on that and hit pin video, and it'll allow you to just see me. Then you would unpin that video for when Roberta talks and pin her video. That's also an option. So with that, I'm going to get started, and I'm going to start by saying this is the first webinar of 3. And so the whole webinar series is called Ignite Performance, Maintaining and Elevating Consistency During the Quarantine. This first section is going to be mainly talking about how to sustain and craft stability for yourself. So with that, I'm actually going to start by sharing a section around how can we be responsible and take ownership for receiving full value, no matter what circumstance and situation that we are in. And this is something that I want to intentionally start off with because it can be applied in any setting, no matter if you're staying at home, no matter if you go back to work and are in your work environment, or even personally in personal settings. So what I want to start off with is actually talking about when people are in a professional setting, often there can be a seminar style where there is some sort of teacher or trainer or a speaker who is training on specific materials, such as this experience right here, right? And often and I would love for you guys to use the chat, who typically is known to bring value to that meeting. Who would you say? The teacher or the trainer? Yep, Julia. Yeah, exactly. And often, even especially in like an educational setting, right, the teacher is valuable. And thank you, Adam. And with that, though it is true that we have, even in this setting, content to deliver to you guys that we want to share with you guys, we, on the flip side, cannot control how well you obtain the information and if you understand it, right? So there's actually 2 sides is what I want to bring up to your awareness and suggest is it's not only on us to make sure you get full value, it's also on you, right? And so with that, we are going to look at, and from a coaching lens, how can we train people to take ownership so that they can receive value and it be untouchable no matter what circumstance and situation that they are in, right? And part of that is getting clear on what would maximum value be for you in that situation or setting that you're in. But the other part is looking at, well, what's the opposite of not receiving value? And so if there was a big, what's that called? A marquee with big flashing lights, then I would want this to be written on it and have it be in everyone's subconscious mind. And that is, there is a direct correlation between the amount of value you receive in any event or situation and how you choose to participate or focus in it. I'll say that again and slow it down. There's a direct correlation between how much value you receive in any event or situation and how you choose to focus and participate in it, right? So if we're looking at the opposite, and this is us getting creative with different ways to poke around and look at different angles of this. If we're looking at the opposite of participating, since that's a correlation to getting value, then that would be, the opposite of it would be 3 areas that can cause you to not participate. The first area would be avoidance, right? And this is what I will call procrastination. I actually train on procrastination, and I've been training on it quite a bit, but I'm going to give you a nutshell of procrastination. And with that, I'm going to share my screen for a list of different ways that people can procrastinate just for fun. Right? So there's all these different ways that people can procrastinate, and there's others as well. But I do want to point out, just because there's things up here that we do every day, it doesn't mean every time we do them is when we procrastinate, right? But it means when we do them to procrastinate, of course, that's when it applies. So I'm going to read off a few, and I'd love for you to take an inventory of what are your favorites. Ways to procrastinate. What are your go-tos? I'll read a few as I just go through and pass with you, but I'll say joke, know it all, play it safe, smoke, drink, get defensive, blame, caretake, social media, clean, daydream, hide, judge, get sick, argue, be shy, fool around, make up excuses, save face, quit, go to the bathroom, chit chat, observe, eat, intellectualize, be right, streaming, and run errands. So I'm going to keep this list up here, but I would love for you guys to use the chat and just let's play and out ourselves. What are your favorite go-tos? What do you tend to find yourself doing when you procrastinate in any situation that you're in? Let's say for your work situation that you're in right now in this season. I see social media, yep, daydream, eat, drink, nap, yeah, eat and drink, great. I find myself, if I'm in this doesn't apply during COVID because we're at stay at home and I live alone, but when I'm in a dinner with extended family, like Thanksgiving dinner, I will go to the bathroom because I don't want to talk to that one relative that I like, it's awkward. So I will go to the bathroom and eat in the bathroom, right? Like you can start combining and double dipping in some of these. Read a book, yep, is a great way to avoid or procrastinate. Social media, yes, Julia, great. And so one thing that I'll stop sharing this, if you want a screenshot or have me send you a screenshot of it, I can. But one thing that I want to point out is to just take the rose-colored glasses off and think about, in this particular webinar, what would some of your go-tos be, and how can you be accountable to see if you're not doing them, or to make sure you're not doing them so you can participate fully, right? The other area, and actually I'm going to make a list on my board here behind, is so there's one way that we can choose to not get value is having avoidance, or procrastination. Now the second, there's 3. The second one is more looking at our external environment distractions, right? So I call them external distractions. And so think about the environment that you are in. Distractions. There we go. With an S. And what can come up in your setting that could be a distraction from a meeting, right? And you can put it in the chat. I'd love to hear what could be some distractions in your current setting. Kids, yes. Yes, for those parents out there, dogs. Mm-hmm. Having web down. Okay. Oh, like the internet down. Mm-hmm. Texting. Yeah. Our phones, noisy neighbors. Yeah. I have a window right in front of me that if the blinds aren't closed, there can be all these things going on outside, and it can be an easy distraction for me from a meeting or a phone call that I'm in, right? Streaming, yes, right? Even if my phone is flipped up, someone mentioned text earlier, if my phone's flipped up and it beeps and I forget that it isn't muted, or the light even of having a text or missed call come in can be distracting, right? So again, taking an inventory of your surroundings and just going, if something could potentially distract me, how is there anything I can do to prevent that from distracting me, right? And the third thing that we'll get into is stress. This is the emotional component. So we'll write down stress here. And it's not just the emotional component. Think of the emotional stress, mental stress, even physical stress. Like I think of if I remember when I got in a couple car accidents and I had really bad whiplash, it was really distracting because of the headache I got and the physical stress on my body from that, right? So there's the physical stress, emotional stress, mental stress, and then there's also the spiritual stress. So one of the things that we work on with our clients, Roberta and I, we work with individuals, teams, and companies, and we really focus on how can we make sure to bring everybody together and receive full value in our trainings, but also, have them train themselves on how to do that in their work environment or in really any environment and have the capability to do that. And one of the things that we do for the stress component is we do what are called grounding exercises. And what that looks like, it can be a number of different things, but depending on where somebody is, if their energy is really high and they got to calm down, then we can do a grounding exercise that's very meditative, or it helps them do some breathing exercises or visualization exercises. And then on the flip side, if they're really exhausted and drained and can't focus very well, then we'll up their energy, right? And do a few different exercises for that. Sometimes it's literally, okay, let's get up and let's do 10 jumping jacks together. Other times it's not that. So it's a variety of different things, but I would love to just invite you guys to think about if you're feeling stress at any given moment, how can you address that by putting almost like compartmentalizing, put that stress to the side, and how can you focus here? That might be a mindful exercise like meditating. It's just a way to ground yourself to be fully present. So with that, I'm going to pass the baton over to Roberta, and she'll be talking a little bit more about this stability.
Great. Thanks, Jenna. I want to say, first of all, as we're getting started in this, I know that there are a lot of opportunities out there right now for web learning and online opportunities. So we really appreciate you guys being here. We're committed to present value and give you opportunities, not just to create insight, but as Jenna was just talking about, to participate. And so as we think about that and get ready to move forward, I'm curious if there are things that you would like to commit to creating during our time, if there are things that you want to walk away with from this webinar. And just to begin to create that awareness, I want to invite you to use the chat also. Like, what would be some things that would make our time over the next 40 minutes or so worthwhile for you to create or learn? So if you guys can add to the chat, we just, it'll help us also bring value and create awareness in yourself to like notice that and be looking for it. Make sense? How to combat COVID fatigue. Yeah, and that's great. You know, there's a lot of new things that we're dealing with in this new environment. And so we're going to take a look at some of our practices that we're used to, and then how to get creative, how to sort of dance within these new systems, and defining time limits on projects. And that's one of the things, as I've been working with my clients, that it really continues to come up, our relationship to time and how it's changing. And so that's a great point, because we are going to look at, again, like, how can we use this unique opportunity to get creative, to build some new muscles, so that not only in this time we move through it with strength, but also coming out of it. So there's going to be a lot of different opportunities, and I'd love for you guys to just, as we continue to go through the material, continue to be looking for what are the things that you want to make sure you grab a hold of and create some action and participation with. So with that, Jenna, you're going to go back into talking about our vision. And you're muted.
Thank you. Yes. And so with looking at Coaching 101, I'm going to give you guys a very brief overview and talk to you about what it is that we're going to be using in the next 3 weeks, and also in this specific portion, this part 1. So when we are coaching, whether again individuals, companies, or teams, we are first looking at what is the reality, where are you right now, right? Then we get clear on what is somebody's vision. And whenever we get clear on both of those, the reality and the vision, a gap is created. And our role is to work and partner with our clients to close the gap. And the gap gets closed a number of different ways, depending on how people are living their life. In coaching, there's one way, but I'm going to talk about the 3 ways people will tend to close the gap. So often, one way that people will close the gap or start to close the gap is they will deflate their vision. They'll say, oh, you know what? COVID's happening, and I have a lot of stress right now, and now my kids are home from school, and so because of that, my vision was this, and now I'm going to diminish it a little bit. Because it's, or even the gap to them, their original gap might be emotionally, like, anxiety driven. So they're like, oh, I wanted to double my income this year, but just kidding, 50% increase is good too, right? Like we'll do that, right? So that's one way people can start to close the gap. Another way is that we will inflate our reality, right? And imagine in your wildest dreams, even with an economic downturn, that someone would go into their online banking account and say, oh shoot, it's a lot less than I thought it was. The amount was a lot less than I thought it was, right? And that is one way that we can start to inflate reality with where we are, right? There's a lot of other examples, but that's one of them. So people can often, as a team, as a culture, as a company, or even individually, can inflate their reality because it helps them think that they are managing the gap and starting to close it faster, right? In coaching, we look at the real reality, the real vision, and we close the real gap, right? And that's because this is an investment, right? Coaching, we work with high-performing, high-achieving performers, and we want to help them become more than high-performing. We call it epic performance, right? And it's a foundational tool in our methodology with our Institute for developing executive coaches, but it's foundational in our coaching with our own clients, because we're up to being able to help people create results that they didn't think they could, that they thought were nearly impossible, right? And even under extenuating circumstances. So that's the main way that that is the way that we close the gap in coaching. And with that, there's something that I want to point out actually, and it's thinking about, as Roberta's going to step into, and we're going to talk about the vision a little bit. We're also going to look at how can we create this stability so that then we can use that stability to get drastically clear on how how our vision might be a new vision that's more helpful and resourceful for us. It still stretches us, but it's helpful and resourceful to challenge us with the things that were out of our control and how they've changed. So with that, I'm going to continue to pass it along to Roberta, and you're going to get into this stability aspect.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Jenna. We do know, like, as we begin to craft our vision, that what we build on matters. And so we want to take some time to really acknowledge the things in our own lives individually where we can create stability. And so I'm curious if you have different habits or patterns that you've developed that ground you, that help you to be the best version of yourself. And even in times of chaos or crisis, like we don't need COVID-19 to know that there are different times when disruption hits our lives. Proof of this might be, has anyone ever failed at anything? Full participation? There we go, thanks. Yeah, so we know that this isn't like a new thing, but we're gonna also pay some tribute to the fact that we are involved in a pandemic. And if you looked at the goals that you had in January 2020, and you're looking at a vision now, I wonder like what emotions might come up. Is there stress or anxiety? And so we want to acknowledge how we feel so that we can craft solutions and ways to ground ourselves. And as coaches, we love to kind of get curious and investigate. Oftentimes in seasons where things are not going right, people will say there'll be a blame game, right? Where I'm not having enough resources, there's not enough time, or there's not enough money. And we want to suggest that it's not resources that are ever the real problem, but it's our lack of being resourceful. And so as we move into this next phase and take some time to notice the needs that we have, the things that we can do to fill ourselves up and to ground ourselves so that we create this stable foundation, I want to invite you to get creative, to be resourceful, and to play around with some of the ways that, like, you may have been someone who went to the gym 2 or 3 times a week, and now you're like, can't do that, right? But are you still taking time? And so I want to give everybody 2 minutes to just journal, if you've got paper or a Word document up, where you can, again, recognize what it is that fills you up and grounds you, and then how can you get creative to meet those needs so that you can show up being the best version of yourself. So we'll set a timer, and we can't really play music on here because it distorts, but you're muted, so play some music and get creative for the next 2 minutes. And if anyone has any questions too, you can private chat Jenna or myself, or public chat it, and we can talk about this more.
All right, so I'm going to say, let's put that on pause and I'm going to have us come back. So, some of the exercises that we're doing as writing exercises today, if you need more time, we encourage you to take more time after our webinar. But for the sake of us wanting to bring you all the material, we're going to keep going. So, I'm going to get into another concept around how we can look at our gauge of what's actually realistic for ourselves right now, right? Not only on these unprecedented circumstances, but also if you're in this gig economy, if you will, where you have gigs to get your income and there's inconsistency, how can you manage what then is realistic for myself and how can I gauge setting goals for myself? So, with that, I'm going to talk about, I like visuals if you can't tell, so I'm going to use my whiteboard again. We're going to talk about, that's not symmetrical, but who cares? A concept around our realm of realistic. And just for fun, I'm going to use a personal example because I don't want to insert specific seeds around your professional world. But let's say right in the middle of our realm of realistic is what people will call comfort. So whatever is comfortable is in the middle of what's realistic, and whatever starts to flirt with the sides of what is realistic or what's outside of realistic is uncomfortable, or like, I can't do that, right? Or this can't happen. So the example I use is I would normally say, well, I'm dating, but it's a pandemic. So let's pretend it's not a pandemic and that we're actually able to go out and date in the real world. So let's say I'm dating, and what is really comfortable for me is making eye contact with a man. Like I'm doing it right now with the men in the webinar, right? No problem. Maybe the step outside of that right here would be me making eye contact with a man and it's not creepy, right? No, I'm kind of kidding. Then the step after that could be, all right, so I'll go on a date with John. And then after that, I could go on a few dates and we could be in an exclusive relationship after X amount of dates. And then the next step after that could be, okay, like I could see us getting more serious by this time, right? But right outside of my realm of realistic is, oh, well, tomorrow I'm dating a movie star, right? So in every area of our life, we have our own gauge of what's realistic for us and what's not, right? And if I were to use the same example of me dating, what happens on a psychological, from a psychological standpoint is quite interesting. So about what can stretch our realm of realistic. So in the example that I gave, let's say I am out at work and I come home and I'm exhausted from a day of work. I have put my pajamas on, I've warmed up a really warm, indulgent meal in the microwave, I've turned on my Netflix and I start watching a movie. Then one of my girlfriends gives me a call and says, hey, Jenna, you know that tavern we went to last week where you met this man, John, and you said you were really curious and interested in him? I said, yeah. She says, well, I'm actually at the same tavern today, and he would love for you to join us. And all of a sudden I light up and I'm like, okay, so what do you suppose I do? I change my clothes really quick, like Superwoman, and I'm out the door in 2 minutes, right? Of course, I put my lipstick on and all that. But what's fascinating about that, and this happens in all these other areas in our life as well, 5 minutes before my friend called, I decided I was exhausted. And then something switched and I lit up and I had all this energy, right? So what they're finding from research from a psychological standpoint is not that comfort actually fuels us as helpful as the potential, having the potential for growth. So if we were to replace comfort with growth, then that could actually mean we could start to stretch our realm of realistic and actually accomplish things that are either flirting with or outside of our realm of realistic and actually accomplish and get those results. So as you're looking at creating a gauge for yourself, think of it as I'm interested in creating opportunities for myself to grow in. So then it can actually be a fueler for you to also say, oh, okay, just because something is uncomfortable doesn't mean that it's bad, right? Or doesn't mean that it's a threat. Like our brain will instantly get process uncomfort or discomfort and go, oh, bad, because it's meant to keep us alive. But in fact, if we just slow it down and process it fully, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's bad. So it's looking at how we can stretch our idea of what's realistic and actually accomplish more than we thought of, right? Which is our goal as coaches. So with that, looking at the mindset component of this, I want to actually just pull the curtain back and tell you guys something that was quite fascinating. Myself and a community of coaches and actually expert therapists and counselors were having a conversation, experts in the LA area. And what we were looking at is just similarities and patterns in our clients. Of course, like counselors and therapists do different work than we do, but from their standpoint, they were looking at the difference of having unhealthy, like depressed clients and clients who weren't, right? And then from a coaching standpoint, we were looking at what's the biggest distinction between clients who are insecure and clients who are confident. And the thing that we were looking at as a whole is, from a psychological standpoint, the confident or the more, the mentally stable client or patients for the counselors and therapists, they can more easily access what they're good at during times of hardship. They can more easily access in their brain what they're good at during times of hardship. So I want us to do an exercise that will take 1 minute. And I want you to think about, what is your secret sauce? What is the thing that makes you so unique on this earth that no one else is like you because of it? And it's not a good thing, that it's not something that you're good at. It's not something that you're great at. It's something that you are exceptional at, right? So I want you to we'll take 1 minute, and I want you to think about, what is the one thing that you are exceptional at? That's your magic power, if you will. Your mark, get set, go. As you're doing this, I want you to just invite you to notice, is this challenging? Is this a new thing you haven't thought about before? Is it a little brain foggy at first? That's okay if it is. It's just to notice it, right? Sometimes our brain can get into brain fog if we're thinking in a way that we hadn't before. So maybe it just requires some more time to get clear, right? With that, I'm going to have Roberta go into our next portion, and she's going to talk about really how you can look at this realm of realistic to set up a strong vision for yourself right now. Go ahead, Roberta.
All right, great. Thank you, Jenna. That's one of my favorite exercises, because I love when people start to recognize their own brilliance and ground into and get really confident in the things that make them exceptional. So if any of you are starting to kind of get your creativity flowing and you're one of those doer personalities, and you're like, all right, off to the races, let's go, I want to say great. And whenever we start to launch into something, it's helpful to have the end goal in mind. So think about, if you were going to run a marathon, when you start that race, you want to know where the finish line is. And what we really are committed to today is building that stable foundation and creating stabilizing muscles, so that as you launch into your vision, you're set up for a win. So, excuse me. With that, I want to invite us to consider the current circumstances. And again, looking at our vision, asking ourselves if any emotions are coming up, and what can drive us, what we choose, or what we can choose to drive us forward. So there's a distinction between fear and faith. And fear is really our imagination going to work, creating the worst case scenarios, and it grounds us into an uncertainty. What if fear could instead create determination or create an eagerness for us? Well, the flip side of fear in this distinction is faith, and I'm not speaking in a spiritual sense, but in the idea that you have faith in yourself or your team, faith that whatever the world throws at you, you're going to take that and utilize that to move forward into your vision. And so when we see the distinction, faith really can fuel our certainty. It can ground us into our creativity. So as we are exploring these different tools, we really do want to create an awareness of a variety of things that are happening as we set goals and create visions for ourselves. So we're going to take some time for you to begin to paint that picture and imagine and dream what kind of vision you would like to create. Noticing the pandemic that we're in, and recognizing that there could be some really unique opportunities that are created because of this season and environment. There's some things happening in the world that I would have never believed back in January are happening today. And so with your creativity and your ability to really get resourceful, what would you like to create in this next season? And this can be an ultimate vision for your whole life, or like you have permission to create a vision for the next month or the next quarter, considering what is going to serve you best. And as you begin to paint the picture, I just want to remind you that realm of realistic that Jenna was playing with. Like, notice if you're playing safe or small. And notice too what's fueling you. Is it that fear, or is it that certainty and faith that you can shoot for it? And we often will talk to our clients about I say it's that thing where your mama said it's going to be fine, and then there's the fantasy. And in the coaching realm, we really try to shoot for that space in the middle where you're not quite sure that you can do it, but man, you want to try. Because the great thing about visions is they thrill us. And we want to anchor into something that's going to make the work worth it, that's going to blow your hair back. When you get up in the morning, you've got something that you really want to go after. So as you paint this picture, we're going to give you some time to get creative, get resourceful, challenge yourself a bit, and discover what you're capable of. Because again, the visions that we create help us discover what we're capable of. So I'm going to set a timer here, and just for maybe 2 minutes, and let you guys get to work on creating that vision. On your mark, get set, go. And as you're up for this challenge too, I also just want to share that the number one, this is kind of fascinating, the number one leadership challenge that most people face is they underestimate what they're capable of. And so we've been poking around at that, creating awareness. And I just want you to keep that in mind as you're dreaming.
All right, so I'm going to bring you back. I'm the bring it back person, if you haven't noticed. So again, if you want to take more time for yourself outside of the webinar, please do. I'd love to have you guys, I'm actually going to see you from a gallery view just to see everyone that has their video on. I'd love to just have you even unmute yourself and share what was some of that like. Was it challenging? Was it uncomfortable? Were certain things really easy? Let's just hear, how did that go for you guys as you were starting to create the vision?
Well, since I've, worked on my vision and it's something that, I've done a lot of thinking about, it wasn't that uncomfortable. But what I think challenged me was trying to accomplish the visions in what's going on today and how more challenging it's become.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, and I definitely hear that, Chris. I think as that's one of the reasons why we didn't give you guys a timeline, for you to create your own timeline and what would be helpful and resourceful for you. Yeah, absolutely. Joey, I saw you unmuted yourself. What are some of your thoughts?
In the process of just kind of writing it out for myself, it made me think kind of about, I learned about doing determinations. And the thing I found challenging with this is not so much making like a checklist of things that I felt I needed to do to get to the vision, like with it, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
Leaving myself room for things to go whichever way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like creating some adaptability within how you're structuring your vision.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's like, well, I'll commit to this and I want to achieve this. And if something happens, it gives some room for it.
Yes.
Yeah, I understand that. Great. Anyone else? Let's hear from one more person. Third time's a charm. Yeah. Oh, Adam, you're unmuted. Oh, and Michael raised his hand. let's do Michael, since he unmuted and raised his hand, and then if we have time to go to Adam, we can. Go ahead.
Well, the big thing with mine was I got into thinking about it, and I realized that as the concept that was brought up was, what if you could set something up that's different right now, and creativity and all that. And I realized that I'm looking for success in what I'm going to be doing in my profession, but in my reality, in my focusing on what I'm doing, I found myself more trying to help the other person succeed more. That would help me, because I'd almost hold on to their coattails kinds of a concept and be able to go along, kind of, succeeding by pushing the other person ahead and being able to do that and motivating them to grow and motivating them and keeping them informed.
Yeah.
Those kinds of things.
Good. That's great. That's great. Adam, what was the comment you were making?
I was just noticing how well you know this, Jenna. I'm in production and post-production. You need to have production in order to do the post-production. It's crew intensive. We're very used to working with other people in close proximity. Fortunately, I work with very small crews, which might serve well in this environment. However, I'm noticing that my thought process is about, okay, how can I make the crew even smaller? How can I make these sessions look better with lighting or whatever. I'm trying to use the old methods and force them into this model. And maybe the answer is imagining completely different methods.
Yeah, talk about creativity and innovation, right? Absolutely. I love where your mind's at. In fact, we're going to be getting into, Roberta and I both, next week, we're going to be getting, it's a great segue, thank you. We're going to be getting into the strategy component of how to start closing the gaps around adaptability, creativity, and innovation. So we request for that meeting, that next part 2, I'll call it, that you guys come in, set up and ready to go with a clear vision, whatever timeline you want to put on it. If some of this was challenging because of our circumstances in whatever way that is for you and how you're being affected. Roberta and I, what we've been doing in this season, because of how the economy has had this downturn, we're actually, since we're not medical providers, we are wanting to be of service to people and volunteer our time to help people right now and be of service. So we are both offering 30-minute consultation meetings for anyone on this call if you would like some help and support in getting clear on this powerful vision. And I want to really emphasize powerful vision because yes, there's room for the innovation that you were speaking to, Adam, and the adaptability that you were speaking to, Joey. And like Roberta had mentioned, the number one leadership challenge 99% of leaders face, even if you are your own leader, is that they drastically underestimate what they are capable of. The second most common leadership challenge is that we will drastically underestimate what our team is capable of, right? And talking about resourceful, right? So with that, I'm going to have Roberta and I both put our scheduling links in the chat. If you guys want to copy and paste it for yourself, and that, or you know someone who could really use a 30-minute meeting to help them get clear on where they are right now and how they want to set goals for themselves, you can copy and paste our links there. I want to actually just close by saying thank you guys for participating and showing up. Again, this specific webinar was to just talk about how to set you up with that stability component and getting clear on vision. In our next webinar, like I said, we're going to dig more into the strategy portion and how to create innovation. And then the third, we're looking at how can we put all of this together to master and maximize our potential with leadership skills for any single person or a leader running a team. So there's a question I have here from Rye. How do we find out about the Institute for Coaching? Great question. You can actually, since I'm the CEO founder, you can actually find my scheduling link, and I can give you, this is easier. I'll just put my email address in here. Jenna at jennadillon.com is my email address, and I can send you some information about that. And you, again, like we will be here for the next 2 Thursdays. We're here to support you guys and your teams or your colleagues, your communities in the best way that we can. So even if I'll speak for myself, and Roberta, if you agree to this, like I'll just see you nod. But we want to be of service, like I said. So if it's even outside of what we are offering with the 30-minute consultation for your vision, but you have questions around like, how do I lead my community right now? How do I lead myself? You're welcome to schedule a session with me, and Roberta's nodding her head, so she says yes too. But we hope to see you next Thursday. Thank you so much. And the following Thursday after that, and feel free to bring some of your community to this if you think it would be valuable for you and them. Thank you guys. See you next week.